Okay, in this video, we will cover chapters 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 17. Let's talk about a thesis statement. So if you have a goal, you want to persuade your audience. A specific goal statement could be, I want my audience to believe that parents should limit the time their children spend viewing television. Remember, in a specific goal statement that you want to include the word should. Now, let's work on a thesis statement. So you want to build on your specific goal statement, what it is that you want your audience to do. So in this case, you want them to limit the time their children spend viewing television. But you also, in your thesis statement, you want to include a point preview. So let's look at this thesis statement. Parents should limit the time their children spend viewing television because heavy television viewing, this is the point preview, desensitizes children to violence and increases violent tendencies in children. Now, when you're working on your speech, so you've got your thesis statement, you do your research, you pull up, you get all these different points that you might include in your speech. You need to think carefully about the main points that you use. So for this thesis statement, if you did some research and you found some interesting information on production values in television shows, really think carefully about whether or not that is relevant to your thesis statement and whether the production values has anything to do with heavy television viewing desensitizing children to violence and increases violent tendencies. Now, we said heavy television viewing. So does the production value, it might be interesting, but does it really relate to the thesis statement? You need to think carefully about that when you consider your main points. All right, presentation aids. Limit the reading that you ask your audience to do. I ask that you follow the 6-6 rule. 6 bullets per slide, 6 words per bullet point. If you have complete sentences on your slide, first of all, it's hard for the audience to read that in most cases. And you don't want your audience reading, you want them listening to you. You need to make sure that the entire audience can see or hear your presentation aid. Fonts should be at least 24 points. Sometimes they need to be larger. If you have an unusual font that you're using, it might be easy to read, but you need to make it large enough. If you have a video or a sound clip, make sure that everyone in the audience can hear it. Speaking of fonts, back to that, make sure that it's easy to read. Times New Roman, compare that with this other font. Everybody in the room needs to be able to read the key words that you have on your slide very quickly. If you have a particular statistic, for example, that you want to call out and make sure that people remember, that might be something that you put in color to draw attention to it. Use dark fonts on light backgrounds. Any citations you can include at the bottom of the slide. And try to limit your information to the top 1/3 or the top 2/3 of the slide, leaving the bottom of the slide blank. That makes it easier for people in the back of the room, so you don't have heads that are, obstructing the view. Okay, delivery. Delivery is how a message is communicated orally and visually, and how if you're going to be effective, you want to use your voice and your body. Aim for a conversational style, like you're just talking to a friend about this particular topic. You want to appear spontaneous. That is why you do not want to memorize a speech. You want to be animated to show that you're interested in this topic. Use your voice. It could be your pitch. If you want to make a point about something exciting, raise your voice. If you have something that you want to emphasize, change the volume of your speech. How fast you talk can be important, and how slow you talk can also make a point. Make sure that you articulate and you pronounce everything. Watch any accents that you have. No one wants to hear a speech delivered in a monotone. No one can listen to a monotone for very long. So use a lot of vocal variety. And use pauses effectively. After you say something important, pause for a moment to let it sink in. Use your body. Make sure that you dress appropriately, that you have good posture, that you appear poised. You want to make eye contact with your audience. It's a way for the speaker to connect with the audience. Use appropriate facial expressions and gestures. Watch your movement. If movement is important to emphasize a point, by all means, use it. Otherwise, be careful. You don't want to be swaying from left to right, balancing, moving your body weight from the left foot to the right foot. That's very distracting to the audience. Remember that persuasive speeches ask for something. They either ask that you agree with me, or you're trying to change their opinion, or change in behavior. You want them to do something, take an action, or maybe to stop doing something. We talked about persuasive proof: logos, pathos, ethos, and mythos. So logos has to do with logical reasoning. Pathos is showing emotion or passion about the topic. Ethos relates to credibility. I think of it as ethics, but making sure that you as the speaker are credible, and that the sources that you use, the research that you do, is credible. And then we have mythos. Mythos is using stories or narratives to make your argument for you. Reasoning fallacies or logical fallacies, they're just errors in reasoning. And sometimes you'll see that politicians will use these. Sometimes you'll see them in the media. And oftentimes they are used to kind of trick the audience. So there are dozens, perhaps hundreds of logical fallacies or reasoning fallacies. These are just a few. Hasty generalization is when a claim is either not supported with evidence, or you only have one weak example. A false cause is, if you say, John smoked cigarettes and dropped out of high school. Well, it's unlikely that smoking cigarettes caused him to drop out of high school. That's a false cause. Either or. If you say that Jefferson College has to charge more for books or the school will close. Well, okay, that's just, there are more possibilities. So that's just a reasoning fallacy that if they don't charge more for books, the school's going to close. A straw man is when a speaker weakens the opposing position by misrepresenting it in some way. And ad hominem is when you attack the speaker rather than the argument. And a slippery slope is where, say that something might the end result might be something that's catastrophic, that's unreasonable. So the example that, if you have children wear school uniforms, they'll all turn into robotic monkeys. Well, that isn't going to happen. That's a slippery slope. Okay, and finally, Chapter 17 talked about persuasive speech patterns. These are a list of them. And the ones that I see students using in persuasive speeches most often are the statement of reasons, the problem cause solution, and the motivated sequence. And the motivated sequence is used most often when you want your audience to take an action. So there was a separate video, and you can go back and watch the separate video on the motivated sequence. But basically, this says that you have to first get their attention, identify a need that explains what the problem is. Then there's a satisfaction step that explains how you can solve their need that you identified for them. Visualization, where you have them picture the end result. And then finally, an action step. This is where you ask them to do something. So stop smoking, buy this product, call this number, send an email today. That's all part of the Monroe's motivated sequence. And that brings us to the end of the review for chapters 11 through 17. I just want to say thank you for a great semester. I hope that you enjoyed the class and that you learned a lot. I certainly enjoyed it, and I learned a lot this semester as well, and really appreciated everybody being in class. Thanks.